Hey, this is video lesson 5.7 and we are going to be graphing on coordinate planes. So let's get started with example 1. In example 1 it says graph point M at -3, 5. So remember, you always start at 0, 0, which is the origin. So you go over to the -3, up to the +5, you put your dot there and label it M. That's it for that one. Now example 2 is a little trickier because we have fractions. So this is graph point N at -2.5, -3.5. So you start at the origin, you go over to -2.5, which is between this -2 and -3, so you're right here. And you go down to -3.5. So 1, 2, 3, and -3.5 is here. Put your dot, label it N, that's it. Now, you ready to try some? We'll split them up into 2 and 2. I want you to try A and B. So pause the video, do just those 2 problems, and restart it when you're done. Go. Okay, let's see how you did. So in A, you had to graph point P at -2, 4. So did you start at the origin and go over to the -2 and up to the +4? So point P should be right there where the arrow is pointing. I'm going to put a dot and label it P. Now for B, you had 0, -4. So you start at the, that's Q, point Q. You have 0, -4. Start at the origin, go over 0, which means you don't go at all, and go down to the -4, which means you should be right there. So that's point Q. All right, so now here's your next job. Your next job is to pause the video, do C and D, restart it when you're done. Go. All right, let's see how you did. So in problem C, you had to graph point R at -1/2, -2.5. So did you start at the origin? When you go over -1/2, you're just going to go over right there. And then you're going to go down -2.5, right there, right where the arrow tip is pointing. And I'm going to put a dot there. And that is point R. All right. And for D, you have to graph point S at 4.5, 1. So starting here, go over to 4.5, which is right there, and up to 1, which is right here. So right where that arrow is pointing, you should have a dot. And that is point S. All right, if you made any mistakes, make sure you fix them before we go on to the next page. Because on the next page, we're going to be graphing points and their reflections. So in example 3, it says graph A at 2, -4, then graph its reflection across the x-axis. So let me show you this one here. First off, look at how they graphed A. 2, -4. So they went over the 2, down to the -4, and that's A. Now then it says graph its reflection across the x-axis. Remember, when you're doing the reflections, for going across the x-axis, I'm going to highlight the x-axis right here. Now remember, the original point was 4 down, so the reflection across the x-axis is going to be 4 above. So that's going to be at 2, +4. And look at how they label the reflection. They have A, and you see that little mark right next to it? That means that's the reflection of point A. So point A is down here. The reflection of point A is up here. All right, in example 4, it says graph B, -1.5, 3, then graph its reflection across the y-axis. So first off, we'll show you where B is, at -1.5, 3. So you go over the -1.5, which is here, go up to 3, which is here, and this is point B. Now the reflection is across the y-axis this time. Oop, I meant that to be the highlighter. So if I highlight the y-axis, now check out the reflection. So B is right here. It's 1.5 to the left. So its reflection is going to be 1.5 to the right, right here, which is the reflection of B. Notice again that little mark that the arrow is pointing towards. All right, so now we're going to have you try some. let's go down. And I want you to try, let's just try E. So do E, pause the video, and you're doing it over here on this coordinate plane. When you're done, restart it, see if you're right. Go. All right, let's see how you did. So in this one, it says graph C at -1, -5, then graph its reflection across the x-axis. So I'm going to start by graphing C at -1, -5. So let me zoom in here. All right, so if I start here, I go over to the -1 and down to the -5. So this is going to be right here where I'm going to put my dot. That's going to be point C. Now the reflection, I'll highlight it here, says then graph its reflection across the x-axis. So let's see if you got this one right. First, the x-axis is right here. Now my reflection, if C is 5 below the x-axis, the reflection is going to be 5 above. So it's going to be right here. And I'm going to label that C with the little mark to show that that's the reflection of C. So if you had that one, give yourself a C. Now, let's go down and have you try problem F. So in problem F, it wants you to, wants you to graph D at 2 and 3.5, then graph its reflection across the y-axis. So pause it, do it, and restart it when you're done. Go. All right, let's see how you did. So first I'm going to graph D at 2, 3.5. So let me zoom in. So I'm going to start at the 0. I'm going to go over to the 2 and up to the 3.5. So here's 3, so here's 3.5. So I'm going to put a dot right there. And that's point D. Now, it says, then graph its reflection across the y-axis. So I'm going to zoom in here. And the y-axis is this one here that I'm highlighting in blue. So notice D is 2 to the right. So my reflection is going to be 2 to the left, right where my arrow is pointing. So that should be labeled the reflection of D with that little mark. All right, if you had that one right, you're doing good. Time to go on to the last page. All right, now we're going to go over example 5, and then you're going to try problem G. Now, example 5 has a lot going on in it, so you're going to have to pay extra attention here. So I'll highlight each part as we go over here. So start. It says, Mr. Martin is using a coordinate plane to design a logo. He graphs points at 2, 4, and 2, -2. So let me start with just that. So 2, 4, and 2, -2. So 2, 4 is right here, and 2, -2 is right here. I have them highlighted in blue. Then it says he reflects 2, -2 across the y-axis. So let's go to 2, -2. Remember, this is 2, -2. And he's going to reflect it across the y-axis. So here's the y-axis. And the reflection is right here. It's 2 to the left there. Okay? Now let me get rid of that. Last. Or not last, I don't think. It says, then he reflects the new point across the x-axis. Well, the new point is this one I just did right there. And here is the x-axis. So now check out my reflection. This is the new point. It's 2 below. So my reflection has to be 2 above. So this is the reflection. Okay. Now, the question says, what figure is Mr. Martin using for his logo? So I'm going to connect it in red. And connect the dots. What figure is that? See if you remember from 5th grade. That is a trapezoid. So after I answered it, after I graphed it, I have to answer trapezoid. All right, so there was a lot going on, but notice how when I went over it, I broke it up into chunks. I did each section, remember, each section I did a different color, but you could do that by circling the parts that you're going to do one sentence at a time, because now you're going to try problem G. Let's read it first. I'll even highlight the sections for you as we go through here. It says, Ms. Shaw is drawing a map of the school. Her room is at -3, 4, and the gym is at 3, 4. So, her room is at -3, 4, and the gym is at 3, 4. So the first thing I would do is graph those. Then it says the library is a reflection of 3, 4 across the x-axis. So I would do that next. This point is reflected across the y-axis to graph the office. Last, this is what you have to answer. What figure is graphed on the map? So that sentence, you're going to write your answer here. So, take a few minutes, pause your video, and do problem G, give it your best, and then restart it when you're done. Go. All right, let's see how you did. So I'm going to start by graphing her room and the gym. So her room is at -3, 4. So -3, 4 is right there. And the gym is at 3, 4. So I'm going to go over to +3 and go up to 4, which is right there. So I'm just going to label that R for room. You didn't have to label it, in G for gym. This is just to help me here. All right, did you get that part right? The next is going to be the library. The library is a reflection of 3, 4 across the x-axis. So here's 3, 4, right? Now we have to reflect that across the x-axis. So here's the x-axis. Now I'm going to highlight that here just so I know. So now, since this is the one I'm reflecting, notice this is 4 above the x-axis. The reflection's got to be 4 below the x-axis. So the library is going to be right here where the arrow is pointing. Now let me get my pen there. I'm going to put a little L for the library. All right. Last, it says this point is reflected across the y-axis to graph the office. So for this one, remember the y-axis is right here, and this point that we just did is reflected across the y-axis. So now, notice this one is 1, 2, 3 to the right, so the reflection has to be 1, 2, 3 to the left. So the office is going to be right there. Okay, let me put a little dot, and I'm going to put a little O for the office. Oop, that looked like a Q, sorry. Now the question says what figure is graphed on the map. So I'm going to connect it. All right, so it's definitely not a trapezoid. And I think it's a rectangle, because if I count, this is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 high. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 wide. So it's definitely not a square, because it's 6 units by 8 units. So that is, ladies and gentlemen, a rectangle. Now, if you had that one completely correct, you did fantastic. If not, just learn from it, because when you do your practice problems down below, you're going to have a chance to correct your mistake. All right, thanks for watching. And as always, if you need any help, come ask me. Later.